writes,
it like
he
that.
directs, he edits, he does music,
Yes.
he does
I'm also
art.
I'm also the spot boy on my set. I work, I do everything.
What is it that you don't do, is my question to you.
Yes.
What is it that you can't do on your set?
Yeah, cooking the meal for the unit. That's
Bas.
the only thing I give up. I don't.
Chalo, noted. But honestly, Sanjay just said, about how he was meeting the most powerful man in the entertainment business, and you have had a singularly, probably the largest singular influence on movies and entertainment across the world. And I know that the answer to this question is probably going to fill up a book. But how has the journey been for you?
It's surreal. It's very surreal because I love this so much. As a fan, I am a member of the audience. I'm a very passionate member of the audience all the time. So the idea that I could even be around folks like Sanjay is amazing to me every day. So for me, the personal part of that is that I always tell people, if you really want to, be successful in what you're doing, make sure you're doing something that you really love, because the hours are terrible. That's a lot of work, a lot of time, but it never feels like work if you're doing something that you love, and this is something I really love. And being able to understand how difficult it is. I mean, when you were describing the world to me in that first pitch, I'm sure 9 out of 10 places you went, they probably said, that's expensive. And you have to be able to see, yeah, that might be expensive, but it's also going to be incredible. It's also going to be spectacular. It's also going to be singular, which is always what you're looking for, is something that is singular. So.
And would this be a good time to also ask you what the future of the entertainment industry is looking like?
Well, look, I have no more insight into the future than anybody else. I do think what is happening over time is that people, the influence that the internet has had on entertainment is mostly that audiences have come to expect things like everything else in their life. When they want it, where they want it, how they want it, more control over it.
Spoiled silly.
Yeah, and I do think that this idea of walking into a movie theater and surrendering for 2 hours, as much as that is a romantic thing that I love to do as well, most people in the audience now are watching the movies for the first time at home. And when they're doing that, the dynamic is very, very different. So you see a movie in the theater and it's much, much bigger than you. You're about 5'7", 5'10", 5'11". The movie's 60 feet tall sometimes. And it starts exactly what time it says it's going to start, and you better be in your seat or you're going to miss it. And you don't touch your phone, and you don't talk to anybody. All those
get that popcorn really fast.
Oh, definitely, and all those things are really wonderful. But the way the audiences are experiencing movies now, for the first time, sometimes they're at home and they're more comfortable, but they're a little more distracted. And more importantly, they have, at the click of a button, they can watch anything ever made. And yet they've chosen to watch your movie. And so that the audience, what we owe the audience is to make good on that choice, so that they don't push that button and watch something different. And it isn't, by the way, you don't have to trick them, you don't have to make it explosive and all that. It has to be more compelling. So I think movies at home have to be more compelling than movies in theaters, because the audience is a little more distracted all the time. And that's not a bad thing. Throughout history, we always have to kind of meet the audience where they are, and increasingly that's where the audience is. So I think leaning into that instead of fighting it would be a helpful thing, and understand that we're all in service to the audience wherever they're watching, on whatever screen they're watching. We have to please the audience always.
That's a lot of food for thought, and I would love to get a filmmaker's perspective on it, but we keep that for a later date. Sanjay, back to you. Your films have always touched on a very crucial, they always have a larger-than-life backdrop. They touch on important aspects of history, and yet your stories are very character-focused and very human story-focused. What is your process? How do you go about, I'm not asking you about your process, but how do you go about researching these wonderful worlds that you create? I mean, some of them are just so unbelievable. I mean,
when
even
you're making a historical in our country, you have to be very careful. So yes, you need to get your facts right, and that is where my research ends, because most of it is imagination, most of it is how I see the period. I do go and see the architecture. When I go there, then I start dreaming my own extra pillars and own extra roofs and own extra carpets. So it's done, but it's not really so detailed as a research, because I find research very boring. I, as a filmmaker, am not set out to make a documentary that I wanted to be exact. I want my impressions, childlike impressions, grown-up impressions, heartbroken lovers' impressions. I want all that to come into the film rather than just document it and research. So I start with making a song. When the song falls in place, then I imagine the whole song unfold. Music is a very important part of my films. A lot of people feel that every film doesn't have to have music, which is right. I mean, there are very important socially relevant films that are made. You don't need music, but I need music. I've grown up listening to music and that's it. So if anything I need to go to inspiration for is music. So music starts, that's my research. Imagination of how that music would happen, of how this woman would look, how will she talk, what is the dialogue, is the dialogue inspiring me, are the dramatic scenes inspiring me. I feel bored about people who say, you know, we did a lot of research and we put it. It's my take on it. And they are right in when the way they do it, because that's how it should be done. But I feel I just start taking off. I just start
So all those
floating.
nuances you bring to your stories and contextualize those nuances actually are all out of your imagination.
Yeah, because if it's there real, then people have seen it. People have seen it in a documentary or in a series or something. This is what they've not seen. So what is Devdas like? Obviously, he's a literature character. But what is Bajirao Mastani like? They have not seen Bajirao Mastani. So I can take all the liberty to watch Bajirao. Because none of them have seen him actually, because he's 300, 400 years ago. So what do I give them that makes them feel that they are seeing a film that we connect to today? This audience, as you say, has changed. 50 years ago, it would have been a different film if I had made Bajirao or Gangubai. So there is a certain modern approach to the way you make a film. The audience has to connect to it. They have to relate to this historical or a period piece. But even Gangubai, I think it was a film set in the 40s and 50s, but they related to everything. There wasn't something that I went into the exact, because I've lived in the brothels, next to the brothels for 30 years of my life, one lane away from the brothels. So I knew in and out what those lanes looked like, smelled like, what are the faces like. So I had my research, I think, and then the rest was imagination. You can't keep going and trying to copy things and make notes. Making notes bore me completely. I'm sorry I sound like a person who film students should not listen to and should not adhere to my style of filmmaking, guys. But
And I bet your version of 300 years ago is way more interesting than it really was 300 years ago.
Yeah, that was where I was leading. You know, he's our most treasured, creative mind in our country. He's the one with the creative vision. His storytelling is always something we don't expect. It's spectacular. I want to know what you think is Sanjay's unique brand of storytelling, and what's the magic that you see in his art sitting there in LA?
No, I mean,
besides his driver calling him.
I mean, I think I've said some of them, but I think it's that the range of the work. I mean, for me, when I think of your career, thinking about silence, thinking about blacks, thinking about Gungabai, thinking about this and the difference, they're wildly different storytelling. It's wildly different worlds that you're building out, and this ability to strike that right balance between style and drama and substance and how you move a story. I think it's very, very, very unique. And the images you put on screen and the way that they move you emotionally, sometimes it's in a tiny step in the dance, or sometimes it's in the line of dialogue. It's subtle and it's unbelievably impactful. For as much work that goes into it, you seem to invest a lot in little movements of emotion. The thing that takes you from being a little bit sad to very sad, or a little bit excited to very excited. It's a beautiful, beautiful art form. So I think that's the thing, and that comes from all that attention to detail we talked about earlier.
And from a Netflix point of view, what can we expect from Hira Mandi? I'm saying, what can we expect from Hira Mandi from a Netflix perspective, from your perspective?
Look, I think that the version, to be the clearest, cleanest version of what it is. I mean, the purest sense, in every bit of the purest sense, and that the fact that we can offer this that will thrill audiences in India, and for many people, it'll be the first time they see anything like this in the world, and the excitement around that we could provide is thrilling.
Great. I'm going to ask you to give us a sort of a deeper insight into the world that you're creating. But before that, Ted, I want to ask you a last question before we kind of open the floor to a lot of people here who want to ask you so many questions. So you deal with world-class storytellers, okay, people who are almost iconic in the kind of work they make. But at the same time, how do you find the balance between being a hands-on person and at the same time giving the artist his creative freedom? And what is the right balance? Because you are at the end of the day making stories that transcend boundaries.
Yeah, I mean, I think the real art of what we do, Monica here, who heads up all of our content in India, shares this same view, this idea that basically our role really is to hopefully pick the projects and pick the storytellers and then give them the tools to do the best work of their life. And if we picked well on both of those fronts, that's really where our art begins and ends. So mostly we're here to empower and we're here to help, because I do think if we choose correctly, the storytellers want to connect with the audience and they do want help. But I think it's very important that our creative executives are invited into the process because they think we bring something to the process that's helpful, not just something that says, you know, I like this and you like that. So I think that's been the thing at the very beginning of Netflix original programming. I didn't have any staff, so we had great creative freedom because I had no choice. I had no one to do it. But then we found that it was really helpful in that I think what artists often were frustrated by overbearing network and studio notes and overbearing creativity, really because and for me I said, let's not do that. Let's not do that. Let's see how much value we can bring to the creator, and that's really been the cornerstone of what we do.
That's a dream association. Yeah. And Sanjay, we've always noticed that in all your films you have pretty iconic and